In the name of God, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy, may God's peace and blessings be with everyone. Welcome to today's law session. We've now entered the discussion around food and the laws around food. It's actually very, very simple, very basic. At a constitutional level, it is super, super simple. And that's the framework that one ought to have in their head. Now, there is a context and a culture around food that exists. Here, I'm not speaking even in the contemporary period. So it's not like, okay, let's talk about what everyone else is doing and then react to that. Interestingly, in the final revelation itself, God is actually reacting and speaking to the culture around the Jews and the pagans. So he's not only basically pressing the reset button on food, given how the Israelite law developed around Jewish iniquities and the punishments and the hardships that was placed on them as a punitive measure. He's talking to a culture around food that has become quite irrational. And and everything I'm saying now, there is explicit evidence for. So even the idea that the culture around food had become irrational, it pervades chapter 6 of the final revelation. So what I want to do with you today is two things. One, just show you where some of the very basic, when I say basic, it is a basic conversation, where the verses sit. And God's not going on and on about food. There are a trillion things that are more important than food. You wouldn't think it amongst certain groups of people, but there really are, right? They're much more important than food. So God doesn't go on and on about it. He mentions a few times here and there what the update to the food is. In fact, in chapter 5, that's where you have the updated covenantal law. And then any reference after that is actually in response to the claims that are being made either by the Ishmaelite pagans or by the Jews. Yeah. That's where he's saying, as in not repeating himself, but that's where it comes up again. But otherwise, God only kind of discusses it once. Now, aside from specific situations like when you're in a state of consecration and you're off to Hajj or Umrah, that's one thing. But just in normal everyday life, in the final revelation, it's basically around the three things. And I'm just going to have a very small PowerPoint to show you. That just gives you guys references and we'll upload that as well. But it's three things that you have to remember. One, when it comes to living animals, there are four very small things. Yeah, which is meta, carrion, blood, drinking blood of an animal, khinzir, swine, right? Pigs, and that over which other than God's name has been mentioned. Those four. That's it. Aside from that, all of the animals, God hasn't said otherwise about, for example, seafood. So all seafood is permitted. When it comes to vegetables and stuff like that, yeah, again, it's all permitted. But what God does say is eat what is good. Yeah, what's permitted for you, meaning everything's been permitted for you, and what is good. Yeah, tayyib. So obviously, if you're going to come across some mushrooms and they're poisonous, then you don't eat that because you die, right? Really clear stuff. So you've got that. And then when it comes to drinking, because that's a form of consumption as well, the things that you drink, just make sure one, they're good for you. So like if you're going to sit there and drink something with 40 spoons of sugar, that clearly is not very good for you. But so there's that general rule, number two. But otherwise, God talks about intoxicants. And in the Arabic, the word is khamar. And khamara in Arabic or mukhamara is anything that infuses. Yeah, it infuses and it fills up and it covers over. And where we're using the English word intoxicant for khamar, in Arabic, the word khamar means that which infuses and covers over your intellect. So if something doesn't do that, you can call it what you want, alcohol, intoxicant, inebriation. If it actually doesn't have that quality, meaning you drink it, and it doesn't matter how much of it you drink, it's perfectly fine, then it doesn't come under that. So there, it's about the effect of something. It's not about what people have decided to call them. Yeah. So it's the same. And I think and that goes also for like let's say pigs. If somebody looks at a cow and calls it a pig, that doesn't mean the cow is forbidden in God's law. God is clearly talking about something specific and oink oink. So if it doesn't oink oink, it doesn't work like that. Yeah. If you could give me one moment. Um, yes. So I'm just going to bring up the PowerPoint. Okay, what's going on here? Ah, that's where it is. Uh, um, there we are. And let's try share that now. Did it work? Yes, it did. Oh, look, as I'm talking, but I think it stopped now. Or it hasn't. I'm just going to leave up the subtitles for you anyway. I'm not sure how precise they're going to be, but I'm sure some of you will probably enjoy them. Yeah. So everyone's going to be like, I think we should do this all the time. So anyhow, what we have here is a very, very small PowerPoint presentation, but it's just more so that you've got reference points there. Like I said, it will be uploaded as well, so you can have a look at it. So here we're just looking at constitutional law around food. What does God's constitutional law tell us? Yeah, and that's the first stage, and that sets the scene. Now, one of the things that you find to be problematic in the ways that people talk about this stuff is that, yeah, but what about the hadith and what about this? And what? I don't care about your whataboutery. That is the appropriate response. When you look at constitutional law, it's doing two things. One, it's giving you the constitutional law, right? This, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, do this. Okay. But what it also does is it sets the scene. Yeah, so it gives you the philosophical framework in which to then engage the conversation. So as the conversation then gets more complex and we go from constitutional law to second order law, yeah, procedural law, and so on, that's where, you have to keep in mind the philosophical framework of the Constitution. And that's what I intend to cover with you today. God willing, it'll be a very short presentation, but I'm sure there'll be much to discuss. Now, here we have the food laws in the proclamation. And these are just, when it says the major verses, that's actually not accurate. These are the verses and themes on lawful and unlawful food. But I want you to remember this first bullet point. هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. God says this, I think it's verse 29 of the second chapter, so it's right at the beginning. There's an argument to say Al-Baqarah, the Heifer, should actually be the first chapter, and Al-Fatiha, the so-called first chapter, is actually just a very small introduction before you actually start. But putting that aside, you have chapter 2, verse, like I said, I think is about 29, 29 or 30, but I think it's 29. So anyhow, God says he created everything on earth for you. God here is speaking more immediately, primarily to the Israelites, after having said to them in the verse before, وَكَيْفَ تَكْفُرُونَ بِاللَّهِ, and how can you be unfaithful to God? كُنْتُمْ أَمْوَاتًا فَأَحْيَاكُمْ, you were dead, meaning you were a people, the walking dead. Yeah, you were under Pharaoh, you were under the Neo-Assyrians, the Babylonians, sorry. The Assyrians also attacked you under the Romans. You weren't even living life. فَأَحْيَاكُمْ, he brought you back to life, i.e. he saved you. Then you will literally die, and then he'll bring you back and judge you, and then you will return to him. Your final abode will be with God. So how can you be unfaithful to him, dear Israelites? And on top of that, how can you be unfaithful to God when he's the one, like he's always had your back? He created everything on earth for you. Meaning, like, not only, and God's point here isn't literally just for the Israelites, but because he's talking to Israelites and they're included in it, he created everything on earth for you. ما في الأرض جميعا, everything on earth. And it's a very interesting conversation because it speaks to evolution, the evolution of the planet and so on. And if you're looking at processes of evolution as well, which I think I discussed in the great overview. But anyhow, more to the immediate point we want to look at is he made everything on earth for you. Therefore, logically, if everything for us Sorry, if everything on earth is for us as human beings, that means everything is permitted. Yeah. That would be the default position. If I said, hey, listen, this is for you, well, then clearly it's permitted. I'm going to say, this is for you, but don't touch it. It doesn't make sense. So therefore, there is this legal maxim that develops. Yeah. That al-aslu fil ashya ibaha. That the default position in the law towards everything is permissive, as in it's permitted. And this goes for everything, including food. So then the question will be like, okay, so that's everything. Now, of course, all generalities come with exceptions. Otherwise, they wouldn't be generalities, they'd just be unqualified. But a generality, an am, will always have a khas or an istithna, they say in Arabic. Yeah, and this is just a philosophical categorization of things. If I say, oh, in general, ABC, that does not deny, yeah, the fact that it may have exceptions. If I said, no, this is unqualified, mutlaqan in Arabic, then it'd be a different story. Yeah, then those things are unqualified, right? That are just complete. Then they don't have exceptions. So generalities have exceptions. So the generality here is that everything is permitted to you, unless there's an exception. Now, are there many exceptions? No, they are literally the ones that I just told you at a constitutional first order level. Yeah, and that's what we'll be looking at. So what we have are the core prohibitions, and you find them here. Yeah. In fact, in chapter 5, verse 3, and I'm going to pull up Abdul Halim's translation only because we haven't translated up to there yet. Chapter 5, verse 3, it really gives you the core and it puts it down. Right. But yeah, the conversation actually starts in chapter 2, verse 173. Yeah, it's just that it develops in chapter 5 right at the beginning. So if you're reading from the beginning, chapter verse 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first 5 verses give you very much everything you need and the philosophy of what you need as well. So God says, yes, there are 4 classes, as I've said. Carrion. Carrion is anything that has died either of natural causes or blunt trauma, i.e., where a gash has not been made. And I mean intentionally made to kill it. There will be a resource lesson to break all of that down for you. It's really, really simple. Like I said, food is not something in any book of law that goes into super, super depth, right? And when I say in any book of law, I apologize. Let me be much more specific about that, because you don't have many books of law today. I think everybody's just scared of the modern world, right? In medieval books of law, it's always very, very small in comparison to all the other conversations that are going on in that piece of work. So these are the 4 things. Okay, moving on. Then you have what I said is the second point, which is lawful and good provision. So eat what's lawful. So don't go and eat those 4 things, but make sure whatever else you're eating, because clearly, aside from those 4 things, is all good to go, right? Make sure it's just good for you. Because remember, you can eat things like you might have an allergy, right? So what for another person might be fine is not so good for you. So this is where, at a general level, at a macro level, there are things that are not good for humans generally, like too much, like I said, too much sugar or too much fat, eating too many carbs and so on, generally speaking, is not good for anybody. But then you have also specific things that might be fine for one person, but it's not good for another person. So, for example, somebody has a higher metabolism, so they actually do need more carbohydrates than the other person, like myself, who can eat a bloody apple and put on weight and put on fat. All right. So, some people have very good stories. So, I'd be a very good hungry person, right? Because I wouldn't need food. All of you skinny dudes would be dying, and I'd just be like, I'm fine. All right. I'm just eating off myself. So again, even what's good at a macro level, yes, for all humans, but then this is also in specifics as well. So it means all of us, even as an aspect of the law, before we get to, as a precursor to the law, you kind of need to be educated about food, about yourself. You need to know yourself very well. In fact, the best believers, yeah, the people who have the highest standards, they have a PhD in self. That goes for their emotions, their psychology, their physiology. Because you can only operate machinery, which is what this is, if you're a master at that machinery. And we're all very, very unique. Therefore, Yeah, if you want to operate at a high level, you have to know how you operate in order to know how to get the best out of you. Yeah. So, for example, never in my life have I been, not that I don't wake up early, but I've not, generally speaking, I've not been an early person unless I needed to be. So it's not like I just wake up, unless I've gone to bed really early, which can happen sometimes. But generally speaking, I know that. Yeah. However, that was mostly into, since I was young, all the way into my 30s. Towards the end of my 30s, it actually shifted. Yeah. So I started to find after about 35, my head is fresh the early in the morning, like 4 in the morning. If I've had a good sleep, fresh in the morning. And even if now I wake up, let's say I woke up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, even then, by the time I hit 7, I don't want to go in the gym. I don't want to move. I don't want to think. Right? My brain, and it's not that I don't want to, but my brain and my body just starts to, it's like a fog. It's tiring. It's knowing that and seeing that shift. Then you can say, okay, cool. I've got some really important stuff to do tomorrow. Let me go to bed early and make sure I wake up at 4 to get that done. Because if I wake up later on in the day, it limits the amount of time that I can be productive. Yeah. So again, a person who has that timetable, then they adapt to it because no one is the same. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. As they say, play to your strengths. Here, again, when it comes to good tayyibat, it's the same principle. If you know you don't process milk very well, yeah, you're lactose intolerant, then yeah, you're not sitting there gulping down bottles of milk, right? Or eating loads of yogurt, whatever the case might be, right? If you know you need more iron in your or fiber in your diet, then that tells you what you need to concentrate your diet around. That is what is good for you. Now, the idea of mentioning Ism Allah, right? Or Hashem in Hebrew, yeah, the name itself. So God says animals should be slaughtered in the name of Allah. Is that an unqualified statement? No. It is a conditional, general statement for the faithful themselves. Yeah. So obviously, if a faithful comes along and says, shall I say the name of God? I decide not to. That's a problem. Now remember, mentioning the name of God as well is a kind of performative act. But does it need to be said out loud? Is it something that is intentioned within a person? These conversations are actually much more to do with the practical world. If you're killing an animal for yourself, do you need to scream your head off? No, right? There have been conversations in more political and social context. Should you say out loud? Many jurists will say yes, but that's not because of the animal itself. One, it lets people know. Number two, it reminds people of the culture. Number three, it's a form of reminding other people, look, we're taking a life, but we do it under God's order, and therefore this is what God has given us, and we are doing it, yeah, in adherence to His law. So there's the performative element of it. But anyhow, the idea going back, then this isn't a ritual, by the way. Yeah, it's more of a sentiment, and I'm going to be talking about that in a moment, in a little more depth. But here, the main issue isn't just slaughtering in the name of God. And I think this is where people get confused with the final revelation. When God says this, He's saying this in reaction to, yeah, meaning in response to the pagans who say you can eat pagan food. Yeah, even if we've slaughtered it in the name of Hubal or Lat, Uzza, Manat, all of those southern Arabian deities or northern Arabian deities, it doesn't matter. And then the companions said back, well, actually, no, we're not going to say it in the name of your God. We're going to say it in the name of our Lord, the one true God. They said, oh, no, you don't need to. So then the response to them was, well, no, we will. We refuse your gods. That's that conversation because what you find in the final revelation, you find two different ones. Yeah, you find the one in chapter 6, which is a response to the pagans, but then you find in chapter 5, God doesn't say it has to have God's name. He says, do not eat animals over which other gods' names have been pronounced. So you might think to yourself, okay, well, that's obvious. If I have to say mine, then I'm not going to eat it like that. Well, no, again, it's circumstantial, right? It's to do with the situation. So if a pagan comes along and says, I've killed it in the name of Allah to Uzza, we say, sorry, not even sorry, I'm just not, no, not eating that. Then no, 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 you can. What's the problem? Eat it. No, I won't. I will say God's name because I'm reacting to that. Yeah. Whereas if an animal's come to me from a person, and we're going to look at this in a moment, yeah, from a person who hasn't been forbidden to me, then I don't even need to get in that conversation. Yeah, because it's about a reaction to the pagans. And that's where we come to here. Who are these other people? Well, one, those people, yeah, the faithful themselves who follow the completed law, right? Who are completely up to date and show their faithfulness to God. Number one, obviously, that's given. Yeah, number two, right? Another category of people that are completely permitted is the food of the former bearers of the covenant. Yeah, the Yahud and the Nasara. Number three, now, these are the only two groups, yeah, or these are the only two kind of categories that God mentions in the final revelation in the midst of conversation, right? Um, so, and that's in chapter 5, verse 5. So then actually, let me explain why first, when you understand why. So the point is, we are killing these animals, and animals have life, and there is a sanctity of life, because if we don't respect that sanctity, then there will just be crazy bloodshed. So the idea that God is the life giver, muhi, and the mumit, the one who gives death, means that that's a part of his sovereignty. So if we're taking life, we are only doing so because the sovereign has permitted it. Yeah. Now, because it's fundamentally under the domain of the sovereign. Now, when it comes to the bearers of the covenant, why? Yeah. It's because they also hold covenantal directives. They also acknowledge that this life is being taken in the name of the creator of the cosmos. Yeah. It's not about, oh, religion. Remember, religions didn't exist in the past. So it's like, why would I, yeah, not why, as in, obviously the assumption would be you could eat anything. So why am I not eating? Because that's what it is here. Remember, everything is permitted unless otherwise stated. So why can't I eat pagans? Because they do not acknowledge the creator of the cosmos. They believe that this idol is sovereign, and therefore the idol has given them permission. Therefore, they take away from the sovereignty of God. What is one of the ultimate aspects of sovereignty? Being a lawgiver. The sovereign is the one who makes the law, right? And on top of that, of course, the sovereign is the provider, the sustainer, and so on. So you believe that this animal here has been sustained to you by this, and you've taken their name. You've invoked them. You can go off with your nonsense. That's the point. But the former bearers of the covenant, they don't do that. Yeah, they acknowledge the creator of the cosmos. There's a big debate of what that creator of the cosmos wanted in terms of mission, legacy, and purpose, but that's more the details of a story. We're talking about the principle. Nobody is denying the creative cosmos and their sovereignty. Okay, what about those who also acknowledge the sovereignty of the creator of the cosmos? But it's not particular that they've followed, yeah, the covenantal laws. Well, like let's take Sikhs, for example. Sikhs believe in Ek Onkar. And let's be frank, their religion is basically Hindu mysticism with the Ishmaelite legacy, with the orientation of the Indians, basically the monotheism of that. So they've taken a bit of Ishmaelite monotheism and Hindu spirituality. That's what's happened. So there, it was just like, okay, so which one is it? Well, while they might have mysticism and stuff that they've kind of taken from the Hindus, that's more just to do with the mystical world. Fundamentally, they do believe in one creator of the cosmos and that he is sovereign. Yeah. The Zoroastrians, yeah, or the Majus. The word Majus comes from Magians. We discussed this in a great overview, right? And today we refer to that also as Zoroastrians. Kind of same. Where you have Zoroastrians, like there are forms of Zoroastrianism that went into kind of like, oh, there's a good God and a bad God and the fire and XYZ. Yeah. However, generally speaking, if you go back, the deen of Zaradesht, the millah of Zaradesht, right, was very much monotheistic, right? Very, very. In fact, it's just like straight up Semitic. It's not Semitic because it's Persian, but it's straight up Semitic monotheism. Yeah. So there, they accept the creative cosmos. So as a result, when it comes to these political, because this is a political conversation, right? Many of even the companions of the final messenger of God, right? They kind of either sat on the fence, or some of them were like, oh, actually, these guys also come under, right, the broad title that we have of the former bearers of the covenant, in the fact that they do acknowledge the sovereignty of God. Yeah. Now let's go back to the former bearers of the covenant. Is it just that they're the creator, that they serve the creator of the cosmos, or that they acknowledge, sorry, the creator's sovereignty? No, that's just one part. What's the second part? The second part is also, whilst they haven't updated and acknowledged the completed law, they still adhere to the logic of the law. And the logic of the law hasn't changed, and its general cultural apparatus hasn't changed. Yeah. As a result, because in the code that they're living by, which is just an older version, the logic of the code, they still live according to that. And yeah, so they've continued, although the Ishmaelite update has come. But the Ishmaelite update isn't that far removed from the logic of the old one, which means, remember, law is based on harms and benefits. The similar logic of harms and benefits are still there. Yeah. And therefore, you have all of this along with the acknowledgement. The acknowledgement of the creator of the cosmos is the most important part here because God actually alludes to that quite a lot. But when you understand that, then you can see why the companions might have looked right to, and the reason I'm talking about the companions is because during the Prophet himself in Arabia wasn't really dealing with Zoroastrians. He didn't come across them. The only people he came across were like Jews and Christians and others, and he ate from them, meaning he ate meat, vegetables, XYZ. And the companions after him continued to do so. It was just that after that, some companions, yeah, they would eat same. They didn't see the they didn't see the Magians or Majus, basically the Zoroastrians, nor like I said, others they would come across similar like to Sikhs, those who are monotheistic, who acknowledge the creative cosmos and their sovereignty. They didn't see those people as included in the pagans. So they would. Some companions, they kept it a bit more constricted, as in they were like, I don't see it like that. I see it very particularly those who also have the scripture, meaning the culture, the covenantal culture as part of their lifestyle, not just the sovereignty aspect. Other companions, they saw it as a sovereignty aspect, clearly. And that's where the conversation basically lies here. But however, people say there's halal food and kitabi food. You hear this term in modern pidgin Arabic English, right? That's absolute nonsense. God says, right? Well, it's not nonsense. I guess in modern Muslim nomenclature, that works. Not modern Muslim nomenclature is made up by immigrants. Yeah, it hasn't, and really uneducated ones, uninformed ones as well. It's got nothing to do with the language of the law. The language of the law, what does God say in 5:5? He says, وَطَعَامُهُمْ حِلٌّ لَكُمْ. Speaking to the Ishmaelites, he says, the food of the former bearers of the covenant, حِلٌّ. Hil is halal, right? It is lawful. So the word halal means lawful. It is lawful for you. So you can't say this is lawful and this is kitabi. So what does that make this? Unlawful? No. If somebody is saying, even in using their Spanglish, their Pidgin Arabic, even if they're using these terms, then that would be the wrong way to describe it. It'd be like all of this is halal. There is no difference. So sometimes people say, oh yeah, but it's different. No, it's all permitted. That's like the difference between a cucumber and a tomato. No, it's all permitted. Just like there is no difference buy-in, as in to the permittedness of the tomato, there's no difference whether the person you bought it from, right, is a complete believer or that person you bought it from is a Christian. The tomato is a tomato. The tomato doesn't become more or less halal or haram. Yeah, it's a bloody tomato. The meat is exactly the same. It's not about this is better or not better. It is permitted. Yeah, therefore, it's exactly the same. Yeah. Now, moving on. This is where, of course, you have an exception, but like I said, hunting and pilgrimage and stuff like that, that's the hunting part might be, but here it's hunting, it shouldn't be hunting and pilgrimage, it's more hunting during pilgrimage. Yeah, so land hunting is forbidden during consecration. So once you're in a state of consecration, ahramtum, right, or ihram, then that's a different story. But we discussed that in the discussion about Hajj anyway. Now, this is where the philosophy comes in. So one part of the philosophy was number two, is more of a philosophy, eat what's good for you. It might be permitted, but it might not be good for you in terms of amounts or how your diet works. So that's one. Yeah. And number two is, right, the other philosophy is the law is as simple as this, and God is very specific many, many a time throughout the proclamation, right, of those who forbid things that God has made permitted. As he says, do not falsely declare things lawful and unlawful, right? Do not say this is permitted and this is not permitted, or lawful and unlawful, making up lies against God. And God was speaking very particularly to the Jews and the pagans, right, about them saying, you're not allowed to eat this, you're not allowed to eat that, you're not allowed to eat this. So he's rebuking tribal taboos, both Israelite and pagan Ishmaelite taboos, and their inherited customs. Our fathers said we're not allowed to eat it. Yeah, which is trying to masquerade as God's law. It's not. Only what God has named is forbidden. That's what God's point is. Yeah, so that's a very, very important part of the philosophy. And this isn't me saying it, God clearly sets this up. And then you have another part of the philosophy, which is moderation and gratitude. Why has God made everything permitted to you? Why? So that you will have more and more resources to give gratitude for. So it's there to fuel gratitude. Of course, if there's no fuel in the car doesn't move. If a person is always in suffering and can't do anything that's of enjoyment, they're not going to sit around saying thank you, are they? Right? Just basic human psychology. So God encourages people to eat. God gives them. And this is why in chapter 2, you see God saying this statement repeatedly to the Israelites. Yeah, kulu washrabu, kulu washrabu. After setting up that conversation, as in this is what he said to Adam and Eve, right, in the sanctuary, eat and drink. Yeah, in many places, ragadan hayth, in that place, ragadan haythu shi'tuma. Ragadan is like as much as you want, whatever you find. Haythu shi'tuma, wherever you find it. God says the same thing to the Israelites. In fact, at one point he says, and we told Moses, strike the rock with your staff. Yeah, and it gushed open. And we said, eat and drink and be merry. Now, what does eat and drink, be merry in that moment mean? Well, it's not talking to the stone itself. What God is saying, and we've always basically said that to you Israelites. When the Exodus generation died, and the next generation fought alongside Joshua and went into the land of Jericho. What does God say? وَإِذْ قُلْنَا ادْخُلُوا هَذِهِ الْقَرْيَةَ. We told him, enter this town, i.e. Jericho. And do what? Eat and drink. And not just eat and drink freely, whatever you want, wherever you find it. And why? Because it's the land of milk and honey, right? That's how it's been described in Genesis. It was meant to be a place where they would have sanctuary, a bit like the Jannah of Adam and Eve, the sanctuary of Adam and Eve. It was meant to be the same. Here, you find a land in which you can eat, enjoy, be merry, right? And you have safety and security. So that you would have gratitude and you uphold God's order. So that's the gratitude part. And then there's the moderation. Anything, and the moderation part, by the way, وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا, do not be excessive, do not be wasteful. Wasteful is not about being wasteful, it's about being excessive. You don't need to waste anymore because we have fridges and freezers. But the point is excessive, going over the top. Because you are feeding a base desire like thirst or hunger, right? You can go over the top. So there needs to be some balance to it because otherwise you destroy yourself. Yeah. If you put in too much petrol in the car, it's always overflowing and stuff, it's not really good for the car either. So it's all about moderation. Moderation meaning take what you need. Yeah. And what you need is what suffices in amount and suffices in the adornment of the act of eating, meaning it smells nice, it tastes nice, right? No one's saying, or not no one. Yeah, it's not that you have to sit there and say, okay, look, this is food, it's cabbage leaf. Let me just sit there munching on it. Yeah, it can taste nice. Clearly, I don't like munching on cabbage leaves, as in I'm not calling it nice. Right? Actually, what's worse is Brussels sprouts, personally. But so let's take Brussels sprouts, right? No one's saying that you have to eat that specifically. You can choose what is nice but don't go over the top. So there are many different ways you could look at going over the top, by the way. If it's one of those where in your normal everyday life, this isn't normal, you can cook a meal in, let's say, 30 minutes or an hour, but you're sitting there taking 4 days. Not as a one-off, as a celebration. So it's like, oh, we're gonna season something and then we'll just leave it. No, I mean literally actively doing that. Then that's a problem. You're just going over the top. If you're spending £400 on food and it's unnecessary, right? And you're not the kind of person, for you, £400 is not like £4, then that's unnecessary. So there is a moderation across the board. It's not just to do with the amount, although, yes, that's the first step. How much are you eating? Yeah, and as Allah tells us in chapter Muhammad or chapter Al-Qital, war, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يَأْكُلُونَ وَيَتَمَتَّعُونَ كَمَا تَأْكُلُ الْأَنْعَامُ وَالنَّارُ مَثْوًى لَهُمْ. Yeah, and those who are unfaithful, they eat and enjoy themselves as livestock eat. Yeah, as in there's no moderation. It's just wherever you find something, it's just nom, 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 nom. So it's that sense of gluttony that comes through. So there is enjoyment, but there has to be some level of discipline across the board. And this isn't just food or drink. This actually goes for everything. So the order that God wants us to live by is one where we enjoy ourselves. Yeah, literally everything is permitted to us. There are little dots here and there. It's like, just don't do that. It's not good for you. Yeah, it doesn't allow you to sustainably enjoy yourself. You like either eat poison or eat bad things and you end up dead, right? Or end up ill, which would then bring the quality of your life down. Therefore, do things that are sustainably enjoyable and give lots of gratitude for them and go, and be fair and make sure everyone gets their fair share of the finite resources. And then this is the part where it comes to intoxicants, right? So we're told here as well, wine and gambling are condemned, right? I put gambling in there because they just tend to come together, right, as sources of both corruption and distraction. So they corrupt the order on land, right? The if impact that they have, and they corrupt the person themselves by distracting them from different things. So, yeah, it distracts them, for example, from keeping connected with God, yeah, as well as having upright dealings in society, so social cohesion. Yeah, as God says about the devil, through these things, إنما يريد الشيطان أن يوقع بينكم العداوة والبغضاء. Yeah, but in the use of these things, what shaitan wants to do, yeah, or the adversary wants to do, is kind of spread between you enmity, yeah, and hatred. So it's seen as a corruptive force for the person and for society. Clear harm. So then what we have is basically a very, very simple, basic overall theme, yeah, across the food laws, right? It's really, really simple. Now, there is a resource lesson. Please do check it out on the hub. And that's to do with the evolution from the Torah down to the proclamation. Yeah. But here now we're looking at the proclamation itself. And you're seeing this single ethic of consecrated living. And what I mean by that is living under God's law. Yeah, and what I mean by his law, I don't mean literal law. I mean living under his kingdom. Yeah, so it's the law of the king. Yeah, just like as I've said before, you guys will say, yep, there is a law in this house. Now that law isn't judicial law, but there's rules. There's an order in how you have your house and how you run your house. So God has an order in the way that he wants the world run, right? So it's living under that order and being faithful, yeah, or keeping faith with that order. And there is the reverence for life itself. Yeah, even the life that is taken for consumption, there is still a reverence to it, and the name must be mentioned. Yeah, al-ism or Hashem. Discipline of appetite. So, at the end of the day, the faithful are disciplined, right? Sustainable enjoyment. The rejection of anything that is in anywhere, by the way, it's not just to do with food, in any given situation, the rejection of anything that tries, yeah, to appropriate God's sovereignty or that which is basically associated with it. Now, there are necessities sometimes, right? So the law is very logical and rational. Okay, listen, pigs are really bad for you. Yeah, sustained eating of pork doesn't really do much good for your body, and because of the diseases they carry and so on, all the problems around swine, you should leave it. However, if you're about to die, then you gotta have that ham sandwich. Yeah. Or it's really, it doesn't need to be death, but it might be really extreme. Why? The whole point you've been told not to eat the swine, yeah, is because it's not good for your health and it might lead to your eventual death. But if it will save you from dying right this moment, then it makes sense. Because the whole point not to eat was to save your life. If it becomes a thing to save your life, then obviously the whole point was life itself. And again, lawful enjoyment, meaning these are good things and they're a gift that you're meant to receive and show gratitude for. And that, people, I hope gives you a very comprehensive, right, fundamental overview of the constitutional law, how simple it is, how basic it is, and how it actually pushes back on anything that attempts to complicate it, not even more than it should, beyond that. Yeah, that's all it should be. And it's as simple as that. Then I'll take your questions, and I know where this is going to go, and I'm looking forward to it. Questions, people. Where are we? There we are. Yes. No questions? Yes, Nikha.
Salam, Sheikh. It's been a while.
It has been.
So just talking through some ideas. So was recently in Japan and just came back. And so knowing what I know so far about what we've discussed over in the QP about believers and not consuming meat that is dedicated to any particular idol or god. So I mean, I'm still primarily I haven't yet psychologically moved to also eating outside the halal domain, although my husband always has. So I mean, we're still very much in the Abrahamic sphere. For a place like Japan, though, which is Shinto, which is kind of in this gray area, it's animistic, kind of pagan, not quite pagan, no central god, that kind of thing, versus our next plans to go to Korea, which is a much more heavily Christian country. How would one navigate that? So I have friends who are Muslims and who will not focus on the zabiha part, but they didn't think so deeply when they went to Japan and they just ate everything anyway. And no shade to them, they're figuring things out. But I was like,
I'll
well,
give
if I
shade
went
all
to,
day. Well, go
sorry,
ahead.
what?
Go ahead. I said I'll give shade all day.
I mean, when I see them next, I will be having this discussion. I didn't think they thought through deeply because they're so used to eating everything in America and
Oh,
Europe that they didn't
yeah.
really think about it, having gone
Oh,
to
okay.
Japan.
I can understand that. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm seeing them at some point, so I will have that
Mm,
brief conversation with them. But yeah, so when you're in a place like that, I would just generally just avoid. I mean,
mhm,
I generally do anyway, but it's like
mhm,
if I went to Korea, I would be depending because a lot more Koreans are Christian, but
mhm.
not all of them. Again, so then how does one navigate believers
It's not like that. It's much
in
more
that?
to do with politics, to be honest. So this is the other conversation, and this is more to do
Yeah.
with procedural elements. And of course, next week we'll be looking at Umdat al-Ahkam. But the procedural elements here are very simply this when it comes to politics. It depends on where you are and what they're known for. Yeah.
Mm,
So, for example, in ancient times, yeah, they would say, "Oh, those lands, who do they belong to? Oh, here, Diyarun Nisara. These are the lands of the what today we call Christians, but the Nazarenes." Okay,
mhm.
cool. Ahl Kitab, let's go. Yeah. And
Yeah.
otherwise, if they were entering, oh, these are the lands of the Yahud. Okay, cool. Done, finish. I mean, so it wasn't, it would be based on that, the kind of culture and the polity and what is generally known as which kind of bracket does it fall into? It would be that. Now, you might go to a pagan land, but then find a believer there, and the believer says, here, that's a different story. But
Yeah.
you have a generality by which you generalize, and that's your default position. And then on the ground, it's specifics. So you might go somewhere, and it might be people who live according to the Quranic law. But then you meet a pagan in that land and they're offering, say, I killed this animal. And they say, no, thank you. So the specifics
Mm,
are the
yeah.
specifics on the ground, but there are general assumptions that are to be made, right? Because you're no one's walking around asking every 10 seconds, and it's not that deep. Yeah. Let's be frank. Even if you were in a land, yeah, and you went, oh, all these people are Christian, and one of them was a pagan, and they slaughtered the animal. and then they gave it to their Christian neighbor, and then they gave it to you. What difference would it make anyway? What literal difference does it make to you anyway? It doesn't. So this is more that part I'm saying um, is more kind of what's the word? Symbolic. Now, if I
Yeah.
know that somebody has claimed sovereignty on behalf of another, this is about taqwa al-qulub, right? So it's to know, well, no, I would never accept you who claim sovereignty, not for the creator of the cosmos, but like I said, for the idol. That's a different story. But
Yeah.
if I don't know, and these people I'm amongst, they generally they affirm the creator of the cosmos, then I'm good to go. So in that sense, and I'm giving you the ancient Near East and how things operated, that's the way they looked at it, and that's the way generally it's been looked at for 1,000 or more years.
Yeah, we were interestingly, Japan, similar to Scandinavia, has a primarily irreligious
That's
population,
that's irrelevant.
right?
See, this is the other problem,
So,
right? Where people say
yeah,
religious, what is religion? What does that
like
even
they
mean?
don't, there's no, you know what I'm saying? Like when you talk about what's the official, I guess there is official. If you want to look at it from politics point of view, you could say yes, there's officially they have Shintoism is their
Exactly.
culture,
Yeah, yeah. So
right?
if that's the
Yeah.
case, right? Because who's
Yeah.
sitting there? Like the guy in the
I
restaurant.
mean, they're not slaughtering their food in the name of anybody.
Yeah. No, no, but that's not my point. But Nikat, you walk
Yeah.
into a Muslim place, you have no idea what they're about. You make assumptions,
Yes, of course.
and there you go. So there's a brown person whose name's Abdul. I can eat his food based on what? So this is my point. At the end of the
That's why
day,
the politics of it is important. Yeah.
yeah, this is my point. Like, where is the standard? Let us be consistent across the board then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like people go in, the guy's brown and his name's Abdul, it's okay. But white dude Tom, no, he might not be Christian. I'm not saying you, by the way. Sorry, Nika. I'm not
No, no,
saying
no.
you.
I
I'm
totally
saying
get it.
yeah,
No, no.
yeah. I'm saying this
In
is
general,
more of
yes,
a. It's
absolutely.
more
There's
of
an
a broad
assumption
point.
made. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. But why? Based on what? If one is going to now say I need to I need to have a census of every single person I ever come across, then surely that goes across the board.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, there's someone will say, oh, but this person is a Muslim. So that's just like an ethnic identity. No, it means someone who's submitted. Okay, but that's what I'm actually questioning in the first place. How do I know Abdul has submitted? I don't know Abdul. I've just walked into the restaurant. I don't know whether these people are people who've submitted. I don't know whether he's rejected God. I have no idea. So on what assumption, on what basis am I making these assumptions? Yeah, me. And by the very same token, on what basis am I making the assumption that Tom isn't? He has nothing to do
Yeah. I mean, I see
with the
that as a
culture.
persistent issue with Muslims in the West, where you
Yeah.
have
Well, that's where
for
this
the
conver but a lot of these conversations come up there. Although funny enough, people will say, I'll give you a really good example. People will say, oh, in England, the people who claim to be of a Christian background, right, is I don't know, 60% or 70%, something like that. Yeah, I think it's 60 something. And again, even these censuses are very, very problematic because they'll say, "Oh, are you a Church of England Christian? Do you go to church?" No. Oh, only 20% of the country actually is Christian. Well, who said that's the definition of being a Christian? That is relevant to this conversation about whether they come under the broad legal, not theological, legal designation of the former bearers of the covenant, that you have to go to church. Where did that even come from? Yeah. So again, coming back, they will say that. But then when you go to Turkey, there's lots of research and there are many, many different surveys that have been taken where 51% of the country self-identifies as Muslim. So if we're going to play this game, how is it you can go to Turkey and enjoy yourself
yeah.
there, right? But it doesn't work in England. So again, there is an inconsistency. Now, thank you for asking the question. I've got some slides, not the slide I've used in a lesson, but some separate slides. Actually, no, not separate slides. That is absolutely wrong. For the resource lesson about the history of covenantal law around food, and it's very, very simple and basic. Even in the Torah, it's like three sections like this. Land animals, sea animals, and birds. Yeah, and air animals, if you want to call them that. Um, I've put the slide together for that lesson as well. Now, one of the interesting things, right, amongst the Israelites, yeah, that obviously now we can see Israelite law is done. Yeah, and all of the things that are very specific to the Israelites, particularly, has been ended. right? And God repressed or pressed the button, reset button, and it went back to just al-Hanifiyya, as-Samha, right? Just normal, chilled out, liberal, easygoing Hanifiyya, right? Tradition of Abraham. That's the Ishmaelite word for it. Now, what were the Israelites doing, especially around the book of Maccabees and Daniel, right? The prophet Daniel. So this is during, right, exile times, yeah? According to a narration with Umar ibn al-Khattab, Daniel, they came across Daniel's grave in Mesopotamia. But anyhow, there you see where they're told, do not eat the foreigner's meat as a political move against assimilation and acknowledging anything about the Babylonian colonizer. Yeah, which is understandable. Okay, fast forward into the 20th century. That same conversation is now brought here with the British colonizer and those people who were formerly under their occupation, namely the South Asians under the British Raj. They have exactly the same outlook. It's really not about whether you can eat Christian Jews, because I know many South Asian brethren. They'll go to Italy and eat. They'll go Spain. They'll go anywhere. But they're British, by the way. But it's in England they say no. And I'm like, but what's the difference? Oh,
Oh
and then
God.
you hear X, Y. No. See, what it is exactly the same principle. They are the colonizers. They're our Babylonians, right? And to eat their meat is to assimilate and be assimilated by the colonizer, right? And to give them, to acknowledge them in any way favorably. I'm not doing that. Not eat their food. And obviously, over
But
time,
they moved to the colonizers' lands.
oh yeah, but that goes for everything, Nikah, right? Oh, look at these people. They go to Dubai, and Dubai's run by the Jews. Bro, did you forget you live in Britain and America? More of your money goes in Israel's pocket than the guy living in Dubai. You get me? It's wild,
I
right?
mean, there
So
are few Western countries right now that didn't colonize the
yeah,
rest of
but
the world.
even arguably they're there in the infrastructure. It's just that they're not like in Spain, for example, but it's just that you have a socialist government, and generally socialists aren't very fond of Zionists, right? But my point is this: everybody forgets their own situation, right? It's quite funny. But anyhow, coming back, so you see that's the same element. And then what happens is over one or two generations, the reasoning is lost. They've forgotten why they had an aversion, particularly to the British, because it's not something that they necessarily have to everybody else. It's the British particularly because they were the colonizers, they were the Babylonians. So what happens is a few generations later, then it just comes down to no, you can't do it. X, Y, Z. It's the reasonings behind it, the political, emotional reasons is lost. And that's where they then try to make arguments. Yeah. They try to make arguments or they try to rationalize what they're saying. And all of that rationality falls straight on its face. It has no basis and it's just waffle. But obviously, now that they are, what's the word? They are very committed to an outcome and a position, you got to make that position work. So they'll go through hermeneutical gymnastics in order to establish that position, but it's so poor. It's just completely see-through. Yeah. Now, of course, if a person says, I just don't want to do it culturally, I guess I did grow up in that culture. So it's just getting over those cultural, emotional habits. Psh, who cares? Like, go do you. That's the difference to saying no, like trying to justify, like the Jews and pagans, that God, you can't do it. God's literally taking them to task for doing exactly the same thing. Now, if you
Mm.
don't want to do it and you don't want your kids to do it, don't. It's like telling somebody, oh, you can eat at McDonald's. And someone says, well, I don't want to eat at McDonald's. I'm like, the first they don't. It's disgusting. The food ain't very good for you, X, Y, Z, and so on. But but if someone goes, oh, yeah, God is forbidden X, Y, Z, yeah, لِمَ تُحَرِّمُ مَا أَحَلَّ اللَّهُ لَكَ, right? As God took the Prophet to task in Surah Tahrim, in the chapter prohibition towards the end, I think is like, actually, I don't even know what number it is, so I'm not going to guess. Yeah. Where God says, why do you make unlawful that which God has permitted you? Yeah, because that's a problem, not just for the individual, right? It is for the individual as well, and I'll come to it in a moment, but also for everybody else, right? Because then what you're trying to do is pervade a law that's basically Jewish and pagan. That's if everyone starts doing that, that's what ends up in the land. So that's first point. there's 3 points I want to make here. Number two, when you do it to yourself, there are many things that are good for you, and you are closing yourself up to the goodness of God. And number three, for leading on from that, there are many things to give gratitude to God, but you don't get access to those resources of gratitude, and therefore you are limited.
Yeah.
Yeah, like really.
When we're on lands that are not of the former bearers of the covenant, be careful, right? Just make an individual decision based on if you know, I guess. First of all, I'm the person who eats meat like 20% of the time. So for me,
No,
it's not a big deal.
so I tell you
But
what
I'm
it is,
just trying to think
Nika,
like
if I
a
may.
rubric to discuss with people,
No, no,
right?
no.
It's just like,
If I'm May, Nika, yeah, you're asking me, and you're too intelligent to ask me these questions. And so therefore, these questions are coming from a place of emotion. Yeah, because you're like, oh, so yeah, so 1 + 1 = 2 then. And you want me to say yes. No, I will not do that to my Nikat because Nikat's too intelligent to be told 1 + 1 = 2.
yeah.
But I know what
I mean,
Nikat's after.
I'm clear in my head. It's just like, yeah, just,
Yeah.
rubber stamping. It's fine. It's
Especially when I'm
fine.
talking to an economist, like, I'm not doing that, right? So
All right,
it's
fair,
too
fair.
basic, right? The conversation is basically that. Now, like
Okay.
I was saying it to somebody else. I can't remember who it was. But in that conversation, I was saying fundamentally in that conversation that when you're talking to people, you have to start at the same place because otherwise you're
Yeah.
justifying something that the premise of which they do not agree with initially. So is the initial point, do we agree on A, B, C, D? No. So then there's no point getting to the second stage of the conversation. Let us deal with that which we disagree with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Agreed. Thank you.
you're welcome. Anyone else? Come on, I want someone to argue with me. Abida. I don't think Abida
Lovely. I wasn't going to argue. I was
Yeah, I
going to
know.
say,
That's what I said. I don't think Abida's gonna.
um, well, one thing I'm really happy about is that I think finally that thing that you tried to tell me, I think months and months ago, about how if something is slaughtered in other than God's name, it doesn't mean that God's name has to be pronounced on it, which at the time I just couldn't get my head around. I thought it meant that if that it was that verse was implying that God's name has to be
Yeah,
pronounced on it.
it's not a ritual. It's a conversation God is having in regards to, like I said, pagans and Jews and so on. But if I come along and I killed an animal, no, don't get me wrong. If it was in my head, nobody would know about this anyway. So it's an irrelevant point when it comes to talking about practicalities. But in my head, if I'm there and I'm about to slaughter an animal and I think, let me take God's name. No, I'm not going to say it.
Mm,
But that's an act of rejection, kufr, right? Forget the animal, there's a problem clearly in me. It's like, oh, shall I pray? No, I'm not going to pray. Clearly, there's something wrong with you, right? So that's a different point. But as a faithful, I acknowledge that this is an animal, and under God's sovereignty, yeah, God gives life, God gives death. I discuss it every day, I teach it every day. Yeah, it's not like it's not there, and I just take that animal and I'm like, I slaughter. Yeah, I wasn't thinking not to do it. It just maybe the idea, just like the initial moment of taking his name just didn't occur to me. Does that mean that nobody can eat this wasted animal? Of course not.
mm, mm. But the other question I did have was sorry, I was frantically trying to find the verse, but I just can't find it. I thought there was something in the final proclamation. Something is mentioned about camels being slaughtered.
Surah
And
Hajj.
okay, right. So yeah, I mean, logic should have led me there, but so I was trying to understand the slaughter element because the reason that most
Ah,
people would
no,
say,
no,
okay,
there's no
you can't.
slaughter. This is another problem. And I was actually going to discuss this next week.
Okay,
It's not about slaughter.
okay,
In
because
Arabic, you're going to see the word is mudhakkar, means there has to be some form of penetration that causes bleeding. So
right,
camels and cows, you can't slice their neck. It's impossible. It's
yeah,
that big, right?
uh-huh,
So right here, either you have a long knife or you have a spear or a sword, and it would go in there straight. Yeah, so that's how you'd kill a camel or a cow.
So that would probably go in the jugular, right? Or, I mean, if you could
No,
aim for a
no,
camel's jugular, no. Because what I'd always been led to believe is
they
because
lied to you, Abid. I know where
I
we're
know,
going to go. Because the
but
minute you
because
say jugular is because this is populism, is jugular
yeah,
has to be. Well, you try and slice a blooming camel's jugular, see how far
yeah, I
you
was
get.
going to say,
Yeah.
um,
It's got
no,
nothing
but
to do with it.
okay, the reason I thought that was because blood is forbidden. I thought the slaughter had to be done in a
Sorry, what
particular
does
manner.
blood is forbidden mean, Abida?
Sorry? Oh,
What does that
because
mean?
you said the four things that you can't consume are carrion,
Yeah.
swine,
So drinking
blood.
blood, yeah.
Okay, all
No,
right.
no, I
So
said drinking blood.
drinking blood, okay, not just the residual blood that may be left in an animal after
Do you
it's.
think you can ever get rid of the residual
No, you can't. This is the thing. And then I
blood?
see people having OCD trying to wash their meat,
Yeah, you're
until
not even meant to
water
wash
is in
meat
it.
anyway because you just end up spreading more germs. The germs are killed in the cooking, and the meat
Yeah.
came out of the animal. So what are you washing?
Okay. So it'll be interesting to go into the slaughter element because,
In
yeah, I mean,
fact, not really. It's not really that deep because again, you keep using the word slaughter, and I know we do that loosely, but it's not about slaughter. The Arabic word of tadkiya with a dal is more just to do with the penetrating around the
okay.
neck, right? Now, of course, if it's little chicken, your little clips,
Mhm.
right? But it's about penetrating in a way that causes blood. Yeah. They
Okay.
call it
So,
they call it a gash to make a gash. Does that make sense? With a sharp object. And
all
that's
right.
to say the opposite. Yeah, that's to speak against the opposite, which is blunt trauma.
Yeah.
And of
Okay.
course, we also know that now biologically, that when it comes to blood trauma, you get internal bleeding. And where internal bleeding and blood congeals in any living matter, that can become toxic. Now, if you're going to go and eat it, then it becomes a massive problem. Yeah.
Mm.
But as
Hmm.
long as it has now, someone say, okay, so if you stab something there across the chest, whatever, no, but that doesn't cause the kind of clean bleeding around here does, which is why this area is centrally located as a target. But like I said, there's going to be times where you can't cut these things, right? So it's going to go straight in. Like I said, there's been more of a stabbing motion, but that is also considered in Arabic because a puncture, a bleeding puncture has been made, right, in that region around the major arteries.
Okay. So that was my other question. That I mean, this is where I think the obsession with abattoirs here has arisen, because there's all this debate about whether, how animals are killed. They're stunned. They're not. I mean, I don't know how animals are killed in conventional abattoirs. What
Yeah,
they
I
do.
don't think I think most people don't know. That's why people get away with really random conversation and stuff. But that's not where you want to go, Abida. Did God say all of that? This is the point.
No.
Yeah, so
My only.
we already discussed the philosophy. The if buts and maybes do not fall in the four categories. So why the if buts and maybes? What are
Yeah.
we
No. My
asking you?
only.
If I said to you, would you like some water? God has permitted it. You say yes or no. Well, oh yeah, but it's got the bubble there and it goes
Okay.
completely against the point that God made. Don't do that.
Right. Okay. My only concern was like if it something like blunt force trauma was being used, but that would probably be a very clinically unsound thing to do because everybody would be ill from meat that was killed,
Yeah,
animals that were killed like that, right?
exactly.
Okay. And my final thing was just an observation. You quoted 731, eat and drink, but do not be excessive. And it just blew my mind about how we, especially South Asians, probably and everywhere, just ignore this particular
To be fair,
verse.
that's not a South Asian problem.
No,
Like, look at
it's
the Western world, right?
yeah, the food
You have
wastage. And,
obesity and all of this wastage as well at
yeah,
the same time.
yeah. But South Asians, particularly, because they purport to follow the Quran,
But
and
is
yet
it
they're
though? I don't know, man. The South Asians
It's
I
not,
know.
I don't think it's South Asians because
Yeah,
if you look at Ramadan, the Middle East waste more food in Ramadan because of their iftar parties. And it's
that's
Malaysia, it's all across the world. So I
yeah.
wouldn't say it's a South Asian thing. It's just,
But not only that, for example, the South Asians I know, in fact, they go over the top. They're like, you have to eat everything on the plate. I'm like, throw it away, bro. It's better in that bin than this bin. And they're like,
mm,
no, we have to finish it. There is excess as a result because then you're overeating just because you need to finish what's on the plate. Although I just never understand why I can't be put in a box and put in a fridge, but that's another story completely. Um, but yeah, I do think, yeah, I'm with Yusuf on
But
that one.
again, that excess is all part of the neoliberal
Yeah.
order as well, because of all the
Exactly. Yeah.
restaurants, the chicken shops, everything. It's
I
just
think it's
mad.
like Allah says in a few places in the final proclamation, when people get comfortable, they start doing really stupid things. And I think we just live in an age. I was just thinking about it earlier today. We live in an age of abject comfortability. I know it's usually abject, what's it called, poverty, but it's completely the opposite now. Everything that we just have is just phenomenal amounts of it. Imagine the amount of water you have in your home, like every time you flush a toilet for the most silly things. Yeah. That just didn't exist in the ancient world, and therefore how much usage occurs. With ease comes a waste, and you see it. I'm not saying that life should be hard, but I think even hard and ease are relative terms. I was talking to my friend about it today. I was like, think about it. If we were on an island, we don't have cookers and this and that, the other. I said, we'd be there covering ourselves with leaves and then we'll go with a spear trying to catch a fish. In the beginning, it would be hard. A year later, it'd be normal. So a lot of the time, we as humans, what we call hard is just that's a very lazy term that we use for those things that aren't that we aren't familiar with. That's all it really is, or we're not used to. The minute we become used to something, it actually becomes very normalized, and the notion of difficulty or hardness goes out the window. So it's always good to put ourselves in that base. Like I try to teach my children anyway. I don't know how far I'll get with it, but because my wife and I live like that, our baseline is very, very low. So for us, it's been really a blessing having that baseline so low, because if anything then goes down towards the baseline, we're still in normal mode. And anything above the baseline, because it's so low, everything is usually above the baseline. So we're just in a constant state of gratitude and happiness. So things have to go really, 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 really wrong for it to be like everything's going wrong for us. Because otherwise, everything goes up and down. But in our world, it goes up and down above the baseline. So we don't really get like really worried about stuff. And the thing is, it's so funny. The more, because we're now in a state of positivity, because the baseline is so low, and this happens because we're not emotionally dragged through the mud and we're not worried and anxious. It'll be what will be, and that's it, right? And it's better than what it should have been, right? In our eyes, you find that you're more productive as a result because then you're not worried in anxiety. You just go and get the job done. And the more and the more positive you are, the more you get done, the more you productive you are. And as a result, you see this, it doesn't even come down, it keeps going up. That's the social science and social psychology, or the psychology of actually, like people say, the more gratitude you give to God, the more you get. Yes, 100%. Because Allah then opens up the doors where your own psychology makes you more productive, it makes you more positive, and therefore you're willing to take more risks in the world. You're willing to put yourself out there because you're in a good place. When you're in anxiety and depression, you're not going to do that. You just hold on. I don't want to try anything. I don't want to do anything X, Y, Z. So obviously nothing happens. And the more you're like that, the more life's ups and downs actually start to take a nosedive, right? Below your benchmark. So again, it's the same with food, right? One thing that I don't do, I was actually telling one of my kids yesterday, because he's one of the only people in my house that's like that. I said, you care about food too much. I said, everybody else is a bit chill, right? My eldest two, they're super, super chill, right? They're just like, what do you want to eat? Wherever there is. Oh, did you eat breakfast today? Lunch? No, couldn't bothered. Why not? Couldn't bother making a sandwich. And these are like 16-year-olds, 15. Now, don't get me wrong, they're not people who don't eat. It's not like they're twigs. Yeah, one of them's like 100 and something kg, right? And he like bench presses 4 plates. But they just don't care. It's not about the food. They could eat till kingdom come, right? But they just don't care. It's not that deep. If you're sitting and say, oh, can I have some food? They will literally just say, here, don't move it here, have it. And in the same way, they see I'm the same as well, right? My wife is the same. Like, food ain't that deep. It doesn't matter how nice the food is. It's probably not the last time in your life you're ever gonna. Is lasagna? It's not that deep. We'll have it next week. You're probably gonna have lasagna 40 million times in your life again. So what's the big deal? Yeah. But it's where you hold on to these things and you're just taking too much. Whereas if your baseline is really low, and what's baseline? Bellyache from hunger. And even then, hunger is an extreme term. I don't think most of us have ever experienced hunger before. We just get peckish. We get degrees of peckish. But even that peckishness, yeah, if that's where your baseline is, right? As long as I'm not keeling over from hunger, anything is amazing. Literally, you can have a boiled egg. And especially when you are peckish, everything tastes amazing, right? So if you're at that level and that's your baseline, anything that can just satiate my hunger, that's what's important. But in order to live at a base level, you actually need to feel that feeling quite often. Otherwise, that feeling is meaningless to you because we're just talking about something. But if you actually put yourself in a position where I'm not going to eat 3 times or 4 times a day because I never actually ever feel peckish as a result. So let me get to a point where actually I'm starting to feel it. Then your baseline starts to drop because then the kind of things you're willing to eat, a cracker with cheese becomes a meal. Yeah, so there are wisdoms in this that actually speak more to general life contentment as well. And this isn't about money. You could be a millionaire and live like this. It's got nothing to do. Obviously, if you don't have a million, you don't have much, then it's brilliant living like this because you don't actually feel like you're missing out on much. You're like, oh, everybody's having roast this and roast that. You're like, I don't care. Even if the roast was there, I probably couldn't eat that much anyway. Was the big deal? And not only that, okay, it's like we live in the Western world, right? Even if I'm relatively poor, I'll have roast sometime. It's not that deep. Nothing is out, nothing normal is out of range. It just might be you don't have it every day, but you might have it once a month. Okay, cool. That's fine. And again,
Yeah.
it speaks to this anyway, the sources.
And plus, you obviously enjoy your, well, we know from Ramadan, you enjoy your food much more if you've not actually eaten. You can enjoy the simplest food, tastes delicious
Yeah,
when you haven't
100%.
eaten.
Yeah, 100%.
Um, Yeah, but it's interesting that you said that about the restricted intake because there was a study I came across that was done on rats or mice or something, where they put them into kind of like starvation mode or something, made them run through mazes and things, and they found that the rodents that were on a restricted, very restricted diet actually became smarter
Mm.
through the course of that restriction. So
Yeah,
it's
I definitely think in the Western world we eat far too much.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Well, thank you for that,
You're
Sheikh. That
welcome.
was very interesting.
You're welcome. Yes, Junaid.
Sheikh, thanks.
Um,
Um, what's it called? What if a Christian says in the name of Jesus when they're is that not
I
like
would,
calling on
I
other
would,
idols?
I would assume they would, bro.
So then
No?
is that not what's it called, mentioning other names other than God?
So then take it up with God then. So then why did he allow you to eat their meat?
So I'm trying to figure out
You tell me, bro.
because they think Jesus is God.
I know. So you tell me then why would God allow you to eat
That was my
Christian? Why would God allow you to eat Christian meat if they believe Jesus in God and they're calling on Jesus's name?
because it's not about their belief.
In what sense?
Um, I guess I think I remember you saying something before about it's about their, I guess, cultural affiliation to the Abrahamic tradition, something like
That's
that.
one thing, yeah. But if they believe Jesus is God, they still believe in a creator of the cosmos, right? Or their conversation is that creator of the cosmos came to Earth in the form of a human whom he called his son to humans, and then went back to doing what he was doing a minute ago. They're
Yeah,
not
but this way it gets
denying it.
confusing because then it's like I feel like you could say that with, well, I would assume you say that with any other religion like Hinduism or whatever,
How?
or like
How?
because it'd be like what's it called? Oh, but they believe in one actual ultimate God. But they just
No.
went a bit off saying that the God came into this form and that form and he's in that form and stuff like
No,
that.
but they believe that's his essence. Whereas the Christians, they say God came to Earth, said hello to everybody, and then went back to doing what he was doing and being transcendent.
Oh,
So
I see.
for them, whether the form is the creator of the cosmos or when he was on Earth, we are talking about the creator of the cosmos.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'll ruminate on that.
I'm not saying that there isn't some form of like, I'm not saying this is a clean monotheism. Obviously, it's not 100%, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, me. And there is a framework that grays the matter that goes into pagan kind of frameworks of understanding 100%. Yeah, me. But what I'm saying is, it's not the same as somebody who believes that God is in this form right now. And there
Yeah.
are many forms of God, right? And those separate forms, they are around us, and we can worship this and show this veneration, and then the culture that comes off that. Yeah, I mean, now, fairly, one of you may say to me, well, what about the Roman Catholics? Yeah, they do.
Mm.
They'll take a saint who are basically gods, like the Hindu gods. They say there's one true creator, and then you've got the Catholics. Cool. Then I will say, come on, this is too easy. What about all of these Muslims then? Because they do the same thing. They got their saints and their holy people who they go and worship in the same exact way. Yeah, literally sainthoods. So what happens there? And remember,
Yeah.
yeah, this isn't just the layman. Even a lot of these people, right? The books behind me, I'm not saying these ones particularly, but I'm saying within the tradition that people study, they had the same thing going on. Yeah, you can get Christian theologians who at the same time are Roman Catholics and they go and do some saint stuff. They got PhDs, they're very clever with the word, right? With their theology, but or law, ecclesiastic law. But then they're praying to this saint and that saint as well. So it's not just a matter of, oh, this is the village people. Very, very highly educated people do exactly the same. So the idea, even amongst, like, I guess, ain't different empires, right? The Persians, the Arabs, and so on, that you had people who might have been legal jurists who were doing that. They did the same. And like I'm
Mm.
saying, so the minute you start to actually apply, as in you apply things consist, not you as in you, Junaid, I'm just talking generally. One applies these things consistently across the board. Then you kind of figure out, yeah, the world is not very much a black and white place, and that simple, to be honest. But it's really about just the consistency of action.
Mm. Yeah. Interesting.
Cool.
Okay, and then the other thing I had was, I guess, what with UK, is it because it identifies as like some kind of Christian country? Because obviously, it's not majority Christian anymore, right? So
I
it's
don't
like
even know what that means.
uh
What does that
like
mean, majority Christian? How do you know?
from 2021 consensus census, sorry.
But we've already had this conversation. A census is not measuring who is, who believes in God, who comes from a from a Jewish, from a Christian background, Christian tradition, who believes in Jesus. It's looking at modern religion.
Yeah,
Bro,
who identified as a
I don't
Christian.
ascribe to Muslim. Does that mean you're not going to eat my meat? Did you understand my
um
point? So at the end of the day, if I go and slaughter an animal, you're gonna be like, no, I'm sorry, bro. You're not part of this formulated. And that's where we're going now in the world. Yeah, when we call it organized religion, most people ain't signing up to it. They're done with that rubbish. Yeah, whether it's created by the church or the mosque, they're done. Yeah, that doesn't mean that they're not godly. Because on the flip side, all the evidence shows that people are more godly, more spiritual, and more actually look to a higher power than any time in the past few decades. What are you, not you as in you, Junaid, what is anybody actually judging? Do consensuses give you the information you, Junaid, are looking for these ahkam al-shar'iyya? No, they're doing something political. But what those political censuses are doing, are they giving you the information you need? Not really. Does that
yeah,
make
but
sense? That's why this whole conversation about, oh, censuses and people this and people doesn't really speak to anything. Now, am I saying that there is, and I acknowledge this, by the way, there is nothing objective that you can put on the table except for perhaps has it declared itself officially a Christian country? And that would be one variable. Yeah. I'm not saying that's an end of be all. I'm saying that's the most objective thing you could perhaps put on the table. Because even censuses, I know it looks like data. So I think somebody says, oh, look, this is quantitative data. That's it. We win. Well, no, actually, it doesn't work like that. Even questionnaires can be leading. So you can get answers. And it actually happened. It's happened over the past few years. It's been exposed. Like, yes, this question asked this question, but the questionnaire worded the question in a particular way that most people took it like this, and that's why they answered ABC. I remember I was reading something and people answered a particular way. Was it in East London? I can't remember where, Newham, Borough of Newham somewhere, right? And it was a bit confusing because for the Asian population, it's not the kind of things that they would say. So everyone was like, oh, see, it's different. And then some researchers were like, well, hang on a minute, have you seen the actual questions that were asked? It confused the situation. And we went back and asked some people, okay, what do you take from this? And they completely misunderstood it. Not because the people were dim, it was because the question was worded very badly, or it was a leading question. So again, you have to be, when it comes to social sciences as well, there is a science to surveying people's attitudes and opinions. And when someone comes along and goes, oh, all these people believe this because this survey said so. It's just like any ijtihad, Junaid. So just because they said it doesn't mean that's what it's actually showing. And all data needs interpretation as well. So there are all of these elements. But like I said, if you're going like the only thing you can kind of say is that, oh, this country, it officially. But like I've always said, by that standard, England is definitely one of them. England's one of a handful of countries in the world that actually officially recognizes itself as a Christian country. America doesn't. Yeah, England, Armenia, I can't remember the others. So again, but I'm not saying that's enough or that isn't enough. My point is, this is actually very much a subjective conversation because the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet, when they went to Syria, right, to Sham, they didn't turn up and go, oh, condition 1, 2, 3, 4. It's much more of sentiment and intuition. Oh, we are amongst, Ahli Kitab. And that was it. That is literally it. I mean, we could see some symbols, some signs. Yep, the people seem that way. Let's go.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess growing up in London, I just never felt that sentiment of like we're amongst people
but
of
Sinead,
like.
you're just weird in London because you live in, I don't know, some insular bubble. You and I don't even have a sense of belonging, remember?
No, well, that's what I said. Like, as in, even like people at school and whatnot. Like most people, just like atheists, or, like just like living like just hedonistic lifestyles, and not even like they don't. Even, they're not even thinking about that kind of stuff. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
but Junaid, that's
So it's
everybody. Even the Muslims that I grew up around was exactly the same.
yeah,
Even
that's what
now,
I'm talking
most of
about.
them
In my
are like
school,
that.
in my
Yeah,
school,
yeah.
they were
But
like
then,
that as well.
Junaid,
Yeah,
that's it. You need to be a vegetarian, my guy.
no, but
That's it.
I'm
No,
saying if you're gonna put
so
it.
you know what? Because he had to give up the burgers and the steaks. That's why. We know what's going on, Junaid.
I've actually tried being vegan before. It was a difficult period in my life. Um,
Was it a difficult period in your life that led you to veganism, or veganism made it difficult?
a bit of both, to be honest. No, but you know what it is? It's because okay, so you're saying that we can't put it down to anything objective, right? So
No,
you're
I'm
saying
not, I'm
that
saying
there's
we
just like,
can't. I'm just saying I can't see how you can put it. But if anybody wants to present something, I'm all
but
ears.
as in you're not putting because obviously you've taken an opinion on the matter and you're not putting it down to anything objective,
No, I
right?
haven't
You're
I
saying
haven't
that
got an opinion on the matter. I'm talking about this as a logical end too. If there is nothing objective that you can put down aside from maybe a political declaration, like I said, because you can read that in the Constitution, that's a legal document. But yeah, I can actually see it. Aside from that, everything else seems to be interpretive. I never said there's no way of there's nothing to measure. I'm talking about objectivity wise. Yeah, I'm saying it's going to be subjective. So therefore, Junaid might come along and say one thing, and then Nikat might say another thing, and they both might be intelligent like positions to hold, and therefore legitimate. However, they see it differently. In that situation, it's going to be very simple. Nikat will just have her position, Junaid will have his, and Junaid's not going to be like, oh, Nikat, you're evil for doing it. So I don't see it that way because of ABCD. And Nikat's going to say the opposite. Well, I don't see it that way because of ABCD. And everyone's going to live to let live. A ring of roses. That's it. As in this kind of situation, you're going to get that. But what I'm saying is, not what I'm saying, sorry, this is a completely different point. A point that I made earlier is just generally where you do have this very judgmental position, right? It actually doesn't come from any knowledge or from any reasoned, even subjective. Even something subjective can be reasoned well. Like not even subjectivity can be reasoned very well. It is meant to be, right? What they come with is absolutely baseless because they have not faced the fact that they themselves, I'm not saying everybody who holds their view, but they themselves are coming at it from an anti-assimilationist, yeah, anti-British Raj position, right? Which they've then inherited. It hasn't dawned on them. Yeah, sometimes it hasn't dawned on them, or even when I say it, it's funny. I was talking to maybe someone maybe about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I made this point, and she actually said, "Actually, I can kind of see that. I can actually see that." So, and that doesn't mean it can change straight away, because if you've been conditioned and socialized into thinking a particular way, there is an emotional investment in those positions as well. It's part of your identity. So that changes, completely.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. I'll think
Cool.
about it further. But yeah, thanks.
You're
Appreciate
welcome. Atif?
No. So yes, sorry. I might have missed something. I had to step away,
No worries.
ironically, to get some food. But yeah, so sometimes I find I'm a bit inconsistent, and I get this thing around asking, not asking too many questions as well. So if I'm in a restaurant, like I'm in a hotel right now, so I asked, I'm now down to the fact that I just say to them, as long as there's no pork or alcohol around my food, I'm good. And I'll go with that. But I notice if I order the same thing, if I was to get delivery, I probably wouldn't bother, and I just eat it, right? But with things like I mentioned, I think in Ramadan you were mentioning around things fried in the same oil as other things, whether that's an issue. And I do remember you
So
saying something
the
around,
conversation is about contamination.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying something about if a cow brushed past a pig or something like that. Was that to do with the contamination subject, or was that something else?
I can't remember what that was a reference to. It sounds
But
like a
what is the verdict on this
of
oil?
what if the cow touches
No, the oil. Forget that. Let's stick to the oil. If something's fried in the same oil as
Yeah,
something
but
else, then it is
would
contaminated, right?
would then you just said what needed to be said. Most of these questions you guys know the answer to.
So it is worth asking, is what I'm saying. I'm always worried about asking too many questions, with this
Yeah,
E
yeah,
number
I wouldn't
nonsense.
ask too many questions,
Yeah,
but you already had the answer to your one. You said, okay, what about if you have the pig oil you have the pig and the cow in the same oil and it is contaminated? And
yeah,
bro, yeah. So then you just answered the question. So that's my point, right? And when I say you don't need to ask that question, I mean you wouldn't need to ask the question because you already had the answer.
yeah, yeah.
Does
Okay,
that make sense?
and this, what about something cooked in alcohol, right? So I asked that, is it cooked in alcohol? And then they go, some chef came out to me once and goes, oh no, it all goes, it evaporates, and that's what alcohol does.
Okay.
You're like, God, man. And then you read some other places, some people say, no, no. Some guys got his chemistry set out and said, it's 0.0. And I was like, oh, God. So there I get it in desserts, right? If they put alcohol in there, and that's probably, and then this is, I don't open a can of worms, but I know, I get it,
What do
right?
you had at the beginning, Atif? As
What,
in the
sorry?
beginning of this lesson?
Yeah. No, sorry.
Okay. So as I said, the word alcohol doesn't exist in Arabic. Yeah, Bacardi Breezer doesn't, Malibu doesn't, Bailey's doesn't, XYZ. Yeah. What you have got is talking about is outcomes. Does this substance intoxicate? We're not talking about amounts. Yeah,
Yeah,
so we're not saying, oh no, no, if I oh, that goes for like cocaine. Like that's got nothing to do with anything, right? We're just saying as a substance, if I was to sit there swigging and drinking as much as I could, because water doesn't do that to me. Ribena doesn't do that. Yeah, tea doesn't do that. So therefore, if I sat there and drank loads of it, is this an inebriating substance? This thing that I'm having right here. I'm not even saying it's alcohol. It could be food. I'm eating this cake. If I stuffed my face, it's probably not good, the tayyib, but if I
yeah.
stuffed my face and ate 10 kgs of the cake, would I be inebriated? No. But nobody could be inebriated by this cake. Then cool. And this is the problem here. Now, any other question that doesn't speak to that generality is a Jewish pagan question. That's what I'm going to
Yeah,
call it. Yeah.
but with alcohol with this in particular, didn't God say about small amounts? Oh, what
I'm
was
going
I
to
going to
say
say?
what I just said, bro, because your question doesn't follow logically from my point. If I ate 10 kgs of this,
Uh,
would it inebriate me? No.
okay.
So then how is it unlawful to eat? God said, do not consume that which will intoxicate you. It doesn't intoxicate me.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that part does. I'm just trying to reconcile with. All right. I'll give it some thought then. That's fine.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Hamza?
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. So the Quran mentions وَمَا أُهِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ بِهِ, like anything other than the name of God is recited, and then obviously it also mentions that طَعَامُ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ حِلٌّ لَكُمْ. So then where does that leave Christians, oh, sorry, not Christians, atheists or agnostics, where they're not going to be using any name, and also they're not people of the book? Like how do you understand that, I
I
guess?
don't need to understand it. Where does that conversation come up?
Say I went to a country and it was just like massively atheistic and massively agnostic.
Okay, so they do not acknowledge the creator of the cosmos and his sovereignty. So I've already answered that question, no?
Fair enough. So it basically it requires a positive affirmation of the creator as opposed to neutral means so because obviously there's a creator other than the creator of the cosmos that someone is acknowledging, which is clearly paganism. Then there's positively affirming the creator of the cosmos, Christianity, Judaism, Ahlul Kitab, etc. And then there's like no affirmation whatsoever. So I'm just understanding that okay, neutral means no affirmation
That's not
means you haven't
neutral.
done it.
No, there's no neutral. Either you
Oh,
affirm or you don't.
okay, fair enough. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, you're looking at the reasoning behind not, but either you do or you don't.
I guess then agnost, where they're like, I think there's something spiritual.
I don't understand what the notion of an agnost is, and I'm telling you the honest truth, right? So, like, because if someone says, yeah, I do believe, because people say I'm agnostic, I do believe, because even the term agnostic, yeah, people will say I do believe A, B, C, D, I just don't follow an official
Organized religion.
religion, organized
Right.
religion. They put themselves in agnostic. I wouldn't. Well, I wouldn't. Obviously, it kind of depends on what you mean by agnostic. Or some people say, I'm just searching. I haven't decided. I'm agnostic. Those are not the two same agnostics. Yeah. So again, but the point is, let's come back to the real world because that's where the problem goes with all of these kind of conversations. The guy who killed my meat, what is he my friend? Is he my neighbor? Like I know if he's agnostic or atheist or a Jew who goes on the Sabbath or to synagogue or doesn't go on the Sabbath to Israel, or he's a Christian or he's a Christian gay. I don't know any of that stuff. So why are we having this conversation for? Why are we having a conversation is absolutely irrelevant. Why are we, sorry, let me say this again. Why are we trying to have a practical conversation in which all of the variables we're considering are not of any practical relevance? It doesn't make sense. At the end of the day, if I'm in America, if I'm in Nigeria, if I'm in Saudi Arabia, if I'm in Pakistan, Australia, wherever I am, I don't know who killed the animal. So what am I going to go based on? Just the generality of what the people are, what the country stands for. Yeah. Unless a dude, I'm at the abattoir or I'm at the farm or the dude tells me. Or I know particularly, I don't know, I come to know who runs the abattoirs in the country. So I'm there in the Vatican and then somebody goes, oh, did you know our abattoirs are run by the Hindus? That's a completely different story, right? But, and I'm not saying that you can't find it. You can, like, not find, at the end of the day, who runs the abattoirs in Britain. Most of the abattoirs in Britain are, right, middle class or, kind of English, kind of Christian background, or Muslims, to be honest. Those are the people who run the abattoirs. Okay, so by and large, what is that saying about meat in Britain? Let's take Ireland. Same principle applies there. Yeah. Then you're in another country and it's like, okay, where do you get it from? Oh, we get our money from Brazil, like Saudi Arabia. Yeah. Or we get our lamb from New Zealand. Okay, cool. You have generalities. Are those generalities enough? Yes, if you're a believer. No, if you're a Jew pagan. And that's it. It's literally as simple as that. Because anything beyond that, right, is forget trying to get into the weeds. Anything beyond that actually goes beyond the practical conversation. That's my point, right? As in, it's not, we're no longer considering a practical situation with practical variables. We've gone into the realm of myth. Now, look, if somebody don't want to do it, don't do it. Yeah, that's my argument. Don't do it. Nobody's forcing you. No one said you have to go and eat. Oh, there's a Christian, you must eat his meat. Nobody's saying that. Yeah. But you don't need to make up stories either, right? And you don't need to, what you don't need to do is engender Jew-pagan culture, because that's a problem. Because it leads to all sorts of problems, as Allah shows us in chapter 6. So in order not to open that door, that leads to a number of cascading problems. Don't open that door. You just don't want to do something, you don't do it. Finish. Done. And it's really as simple as that. I find it quite comedic, yeah, as well as I find it hard to sympathize, yeah, why people feel the need. But we do this, like we're nano minuscule stuff. I don't get it. Yeah, just generally speaking. I get that someone says, listen, cool, is that basic? Okay, you know what? But I was conditioned, socialized to do something for 30 years. We were told it's evil. I mean, like it's when you go to do something, then you have this thing reflex that you're not allowed to do. I get that. It's funny, right? I've spoken to some people who used to be Muslims, right? So they left Islam. I asked them, do they eat pork? They said no. They drink alcohol, but nobody eats pork. I was like, that's interesting. Why? I guess conditioning, socialization. You're told it's dirty, disgusting. So even when you see it, you're like, ugh. Yeah, as a result. Like even in Arabia, right? It's funny as hell. Pigs. Pigs are just so, it's like a swear word, right? I remember my wife when she was studying Arabic, right, in Egypt. Yeah, one of her Arabic teachers. And her Arabic teacher goes, okay, give me a name of a hayawan, of an animal. She goes, khinzir. And the teacher looked at her like she swore. She goes, no, 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 you can't use that one. My wife was like, why? It's an animal. No, 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 no. This is haram. Haram. She goes, yeah, but we weren't talking about eating them. You just said in a farm. She goes, what kind of farm is this? She goes, every farm in England. She goes, no, this is evil. We don't say these words. So they have such a visceral reaction to it. Now, is that visceral reaction rational? No, it's an emotional one. And understandably, it triggers. So I get that. It's just this whole, oh, but this, but this, but this. It's like, what is the but this about? God's already said, here are the four. Yeah. Here are the four. Boom. Don't take anything that will change your mind and cause problems, both in terms of social cohesion in the world, in society, as well as for yourselves. Yeah. And then beyond that, get on with the show. But why? Why are you, not why as in don't do it, save yourself. Forget all of that. I just don't even get the response. What is it? Do you not want to eat it? Then don't eat it. Just remember, it's not for me. Someone comes with Brussels sprouts. I don't bar. I'm not for me. Why? Don't like the taste or the smell. Really simple. Just like when the Prophet was asked about dhab, and Khalid bin Walid said, "What is it? Haramun huwa ya Rasulullah? Is it forbidden?" He was, "No, just not my thing." That's it. It wasn't that deep. So yeah, that's what it comes down to. Hiba.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Salam.
Yeah, I had a similar question. Because as you said, get on with the show. It's almost like I might have taken it too far, and then you think, well, am I like having a reaction from like the Salafi days where you go the other way around? So
Yeah.
for example, if you're traveling to a country, let's say Japan, Southeast Asia, where they don't, we have to take it generally, right? Like the general culture is this, and so therefore their food will be this roughly.
Yeah.
So is it okay? Is the approach okay then to like order meat options, but then similar, like say Bismillah and then eat it and
So
just keep going?
there
Like,
is that, right? So you have the hadith. Pardon me. You have the hadith of Aisha, which is in Sahih al-Bukhari. Yeah. And in one narration is actually about her father, Abu Bakr. But in another one, right, she says, أَنَّ قَوْمًا قَالُوا لِلنَّبِي. Yeah. So a group of people came and said to the Messenger of God, إِنَّ قَوْمًا يَأْتُونَنَا بِاللَّحْمِ. Yeah, so a group will come to us with meat. لا ندري ذكر اسم الله عليه أم لا. We have no idea if they've said the name of God over it or not. The Prophet says, سموا الله عليه وكلوه. Yeah, well, you just take the name of God over it. Yeah, over the food, the cooked food in front of you, and eat it. Right? So there is that argument. Yeah, there is that argument. So if there's that argument, what's the comeback to it? Well, the comeback to it is how that hadith then continues, because Aisha then comments, وَكَانُوا حَدِيثَ أَحْدٍ بِالْكُفْرِ. Yeah, is that they had just come out of disbelief. They've just come out, meaning they were newly, like they had just entered the polity at Medina, right? And they didn't really know much about the laws and stuff. So now the question is that okay? And they didn't know. If you don't know something or whatever, that's a different story, then samillah. But as for somebody who is actively killing and doesn't actively goes, not goes out their way, but actively does not acknowledge God's name. Yeah. Not God's name, sorry, God's sovereignty and so on. That's a separate issue. Because here then, that hadith tells us it's not really about saying it. If you're not sure, you just say it. It's cool. Right? If you're not sure that a person who affirms God's sovereignty and that he's the Lord of the cosmos, and so on, then you say it yourself. It's okay. The principle is there, right? And you should say the name of God in everything anyway. So there you go. Whereas if they're not from that, from they, in terms of understanding the sovereignty of God, God is the giver of life. God is the giver of death. If that's something that they don't even conform to, then just on principle, I'm giving you both sides of the argument. One can say, well, no, on principle, I'm not going to do it because they are not a
Right.
people who acknowledge God.
So you take the argument that you're comfortable with that you could present to God.
But that goes for everything, Hiba.
Yeah,
Like I say to everyone on everything in their life, food, this isn't even an important conversation. Like this has just become ideological because of people from the former Raj. Yeah, they see it's very politicized as an assimilationist kind of activity, right? But let's be frank, food is not important in the slightest. Yeah, I love the way Jawaria put it. The law is super easy because the actual job of upholding God, the code and the mission is the hard one. Obviously, what people have done is they've made the law hard, so they never get to actually fight in the battle, right? They burn out by the time because they can't eat a steak, right?
that's it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, really well said.
yeah, but so yeah, it's really not that deep. But in any case, everything, even this, even as I was talking, flushing the toilet, everything should be like, okay, if I had to stand in God's court, can I justify what I do and how I do it? Yeah,
Yeah, I
obviously,
mean,
yeah. Go on.
yeah, so like it's not that deep. If I take that as a principle, in Japan, for example, people will bow to you and you think, oh, I'm never going to meet this person. It's just polite to nod your head a little bit and just
But yeah,
acknowledge
but
their
nodding,
presence. I'm
nodding
not
your head.
venerating them.
No, but nodding your head is not bowing. This is a big mistake as well, that this is a Western. Again, there's a lot of ignorance in the Western world. Doing that to somebody is not bowing. Bowing is ruku, sujood, right?
So the
Yeah.
way they do it, is that bowing, like
No,
that
that's
full?
nodding your head. Oma
No, if they do
arasahu.
it with the whole body.
Oh yeah, obviously that's going over the top, right? But all I'm saying is that if someone does that, because oh, you shouldn't bow. I didn't. This is not
Hmm.
this is not the bowing. And in fact, you get me, like there has been a debate and an argument about like like the actual conversation is about sujud, not even bowing.
So if you did
Because
it, it's okay.
what do you mean is it okay? What do you mean by that
I
statement?
didn't, I didn't like, for example, if you weighed the pros
Because
and
we're talking
cons,
about law, so the conversation about is it okay? I'm trying
yeah,
to process that within a legal thinking.
yeah. As in, if you were just in a shop and the shopkeeper bowed out of like just thanks and gratitude to you, because they do a lot of bowing over there, um, and you just like returned the kind of gesture and you walked away and you're never going to see him again. It's just a
I
gesture of
don't know why
gratitude.
that's
You're not going to make
relevant.
a big
No,
deed.
no, one minute,
You're not
one
going to
minute.
make a big.
What's the walking away and never seeing them again? How is that relevant here? I might be missing something. So I'm just trying
As
to
in,
understand every part of what
okay,
you're
like
saying.
they're not a teacher. They're not like for martial arts, for example. You're not going to keep seeing them.
But even
You
if I
don't
did
see them
keep
as a
seeing them,
guru.
what difference does that make of seeing and not seeing?
Because it's like in my head, it's like a long-term relationship where you're going to keep seeing them. You are learning from them. You're kind of they're like borderline venerating them, but or could easily be the teacher could see that as you're venerating them.
But
But
say the
if
teacher
it's like
gets 4,000 random people who he's never ever
yeah,
going to see again bowing to him every other day, wouldn't the same thing happen?
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
true.
what I'm trying to remember, I'm thinking very legally here. Yeah. So from a legal, because sometimes people come to me and they say about marriage, for example, and they'll give me a proper story, and they think every point they're making is relevant, but I'll say, well, this isn't legally. It's a bit like sitting with a lawyer, right, or solicitor, and they're like, actually, that's not legal relevant. And you're like, no, put it in, and they're like, no, it won't work. In the court, the judge won't care about these things. So in the same principle here is like I'm trying to look at your argument, basic. I'm not saying you're presenting an argument. I'm saying your case, the case you're presenting,
Yes.
right? And you've given these something that doesn't seem very relevant, right? As a point of if it would be okay. Like I said, what is relevant, for example, is the definition of bowing, right? As in what is the behavior that God does not want, that was removed, right, from being acceptable as a social premise. Yeah, what was the thing that was removed? Was it bowing your head? Was it prostrating on the floor? Was it bowing a full 90 degrees? Because there are levels. And even in the ancient world, they would bow their head to each other, bow their head meaning like that. And that's why I use the Arabic, Oma ra'sahu is completely different to sajada. Yeah, he
Yeah.
bowed on the floor. So again, if you're talking about a physical representation of respect,
Mm.
yeah, it's perfectly permissible up to a certain degree. And then beyond
Right.
that degree, because clearly this is not the same as me going on the floor. So somewhere between this and going on the floor, obviously there's a cutoff point, right? Logically speaking. And then anything beyond that is not behavior that God wants in the world. Now, that's not to say it's evil. This is not me saying do it, by the way. I'm just saying, how do we place this in the law? It's not evil. It isn't in any way associating God's sovereignty with another. Yeah, it doesn't do any of that. Yeah. As you said, this is more to do with culture and X and Y and Z. Yeah. But there is
Mm.
even culture in which, whether it's my culture or not my culture, there are certain aspects of culture that lead to harm. And those people uphold God's order, they just don't contribute to it. Even if in and of itself, as a one-off, it doesn't do that, they just don't contribute. I'll give an example, Hiba. Say you went to a culture and you said, oh, look, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that they want to have sex with you, but the way people greet there is they kiss each other on the lips.
Yes, yes.
And I went,
South
okay,
America.
Hiba. Yeah, so go like
No,
Hiba.
well, not on the lips, but
Yeah. No, I mean on the lips. So I'm being really straight up about it, like as in being quiet. I want to make a really strong example here. Like obviously there are levels. There's waving, there's shaking hand, there's hugging. There's many steps before you get to kiss. It's not so here, imagine the kiss is like a sujood, right? As in that level. Yeah.
yeah.
And then you have Omar with his head, as in bowing is shaking the hand. Obviously there's a range. But even there, I'm trying to give one that's analogous, hopefully, and hopefully it's working, is that there is a range beyond which point any one of us will be like, no, that's going too far.
Yes, yes.
Do you understand? So
Yeah,
then the question
yeah.
on this, so then someone I could come back to you and say, yeah, but in our country, we don't mean it like that. It doesn't mean somebody's trying to sexually do anything. You're like, I can acknowledge that within the framework of your culture that has a XYZ, right? However, I don't think that's conducive to a healthy society, and I'm not going to partake in it. Oh, but it's only once. I don't
Yes.
disagree. But the point is, I just don't feed into unhealthy behaviors.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? So it
Yeah, yeah.
comes down to that conversation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess like you were talking about the bowing and then food today, it just feels like have I taken that it's not too deep, too far on the
No,
other
it's not
end?
too
And
deep, but I think that's just part of the journey. But you could say the other
yeah,
way, right?
yeah,
This is the funny thing. People only do it on this side, which is the side Allah wanted us on. When it comes to the extremism side, no one ever asks, am I going in too deep? I'm not deep enough.
true, true.
I'm at the bottom of the ocean. Shall I dig for oil? No, yeah, shall I make my way back to the top of the ocean? So it's quite funny. Now, at the end of the day, there is a law there. Yeah, but again, I think that's also part of the conditioning Hibah, because it's like if you're extreme, you're in the safe zone. I don't believe that to be the case at all. Because Allah talks about those people who, like going against Allah's hudud, Allah's boundaries. It's not just you're going against it by doing haram. You can also do it by denying the halal. It works both ways. There are verses in the Quran that are explicit about it. Yeah. So God's boundaries are both the permitted and the impermissible, not just the impermissible. So don't come close to God's boundaries or destroy what He's actually permitted as well. So it's actually about maintaining a balance, and that's what adal or wasat, you get me, and so on, they mean or they allude to this idea of balance. Now, it's really funny. I've come to this point because the other day I was driving and I was like, when I get home, I'm going to write an article. And that article was actually about the idea of balance. Balance isn't some, I think this is where people like, obviously, people who are judgmental and so on, because they're not cultivators and nurturers, they don't understand this. Balance is something most people find very hard to do. Yeah. But I also believe that people are terrible at balance because they are never allowed to cultivate the skill of balancing. Does that make sense? Because it's not something that you just find the middle perfectly. It's a skill. It's like tightrope walking, right? You got to balance yourself. It's a skill that develops over time. It takes 10, 15, 20 years. Therefore, you find a person who has been like that. It's only when they get a bit older, you're like, oh, they're very mature. The word rushed. When does it come? When a person's 40. It takes a long time to be able to hone the skill of finding balance in things. But because people aren't allowed to hone that skill, you find whenever they're in a given situation, they struggle to find the balance in that situation. Whether it's a social one, a moral one, a political one, cultural one, or so on. And it's because they're not allowed that space to develop that. And we see that even in physicality, kids don't go from crawling, or no, not crawling, of lying on their back one moment, suddenly they're walking and running a marathon. It takes time to even physically find balance. The same with riding a bicycle. And that happens fairly quickly, physicality. But all of these scenarios and social situations in the world, they're all very unique, and there's about 1 trillion of them. So it takes quite a while for the AI, yeah, to do this machine learning from all of these cases and then find, how to find balance very quickly in a given situation. But I don't
Yeah.
think it's a matter of, oh, am I going too far? You always go too far and not far enough. That's what balance is, trying to find that until you settle nicely on something. It's just
Yeah.
that
Do you
some
mean
people
like
get there quickly.
discernment?
Pardon?
Do you mean discernment? Like
No,
where no?
no.
Okay.
Discernment is this. But I mean actually
Mhm.
taking positions. And because it doesn't come just from discernment, it also comes from reflexes, intuitions, experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I got it. Yeah. Thanks so much.
you're welcome. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining me, people. It's been lovely. Hopefully, we'll have some more debates about Ahl Kitab. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure it's going to come, right? Don't assume I'm not going to write no essays, though, on the forums. If you think that's happening, that's not happening. However, definitely in the sessions, you're more than free to bring that up. In the next session, I'll be putting up a lesson. There was a lesson. Yes, a resource lesson that I referred to earlier. That will be going up along with this. And not along with this as in immediately, but it'll be coming after this. And then in the next session, we will be looking at Umdat al-Ahkam. And you'll see it's very, very short. Yeah, there's not a lot that they go through, or not they, Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi has compiled on the topic. That's because just generally, again, like I said, food consumption isn't seen as that deep. It's really simple. Just don't eat a couple of those things. Don't consume that which leads your brain to do this, and keep the show on the road, enjoy what's good for you. And that's about it. And I think that is a very, very simple way. And that's really where the conversation ends. Then everything like this, they're just irrelevant points. It's like if you don't want to go and, yeah, but what about the Christian? Bro, if you don't want to eat the Christians, don't eat the Christians. Nobody forced you to. You can't say it's unlawful, but it's just not your cup of tea. It's cool. You don't have to. This is what I was talking about, the hermeneutical gymnastics to justify a position. But it's not a position you need to hold. And I think what ends up happening is that people feel they need to justify not a position they hold, a feeling that they have, right? Or something they've been socialized into. You don't need to justify that to anybody. You do you, right? It's as simple as that. Like I said, if you don't like Brussels sprouts, don't eat Brussels sprouts. I don't need to sit and justify. Oh no, well, in the look. It's a defensiveness that speaks to an insecurity. There's nothing to be insecure about. If I don't like Brussels sprouts, it's just not my cup of tea. Or as I said, it might be like, when we were growing up, didn't really like it that much. Maybe I was forced to eat it. Not really, I'm just making up something, right? But I was forced to eat, and as a result, I've just got an aversion to it. That's it. Yeah. So a lot of the conversation is basically like that, because what happens is the minute somebody tries hermeneutical gymnastics, we open the door to another mess somewhere else. And that is a mindset and a mentality that is Jewish pagan, as I said, from chapter 6. And that ends up a cascade of rabbinic kind of thinking or paganistic restrictions that actually corrupts the order of God. So it opens it up to an attitude that is against the order of God. In and of itself is not necessarily the only problem, but it leads to nefarious effects later on. All right, and you see, that's what I've always said. Revelation law, this is not religious. This is actually social science, to be honest. So with that, people, enjoy the rest of your evening. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and I look forward to our next one. Take care, and may God's peace and blessings be with you all.